Joining me this afternoon for more analysis on the Matric pass rate and the schooling system in general, Dr. Stephen Taylor, advisor to the Department of Basic Education. Also, Martin Gustafsson, a researcher with the Department of Economics at Stellenbosch University. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. So at the end of all of this, I mean, you want a schooling system that, number one, produces an individual that is prepared for either the workplace or tertiary education. And of course, you have an economy that's calling for relevant skills. Now, Stephen, let me start with you. Can we associate the 75.8% pass rate to a healthy education system? I would imagine it's more complex than that.
It is more complex than that. So the 75.8% pass rate tells us what proportion of the 2014 class actually passed Matric. But that doesn't tell you how many people didn't reach Matric. So there are many more indicators you need to look at if you want to understand the health of the education system in terms of its ability to provide for the labour market and the economy. We know that roughly 40 to 45% of youths actually do attain a Matric, which means that roughly half of youth, just less than half of youth, don't actually even reach Matric. So there's a lot more indicators one needs to look at, both in terms of access, but also quality, and especially quality in the early grades, measurements of learning skills, which will give you an indication of the quality of Matric passes in years to come.
Martin, I would imagine the identification and the clarity and unambiguous nature in which we identify these aspects is important because we have to employ a solution.
Yes, it's very easy to become confused around what is happening in education. Are things improving? Are they getting worse? The Matric results are important for various reasons, but they're not a terribly good indication of whether quality is improving or not. This problem that the OECD report refers to. And I think what we need to do in South Africa to a greater extent is to look at fundamental basic skills, the basic language and mathematics skills that underpin everything else we want to do, vocational training, the Matric, and so on. And which also assist us in getting good Matric results, because in some sense we're rather fixated on the Matric pass rate, whilst for universities, for instance, what's far more important is number of bachelor's level passes or distinctions or mathematics at a 70% score.
In order to achieve that, I mean, Stephen, really you have to keep people in school to get good results. And let's talk about the dropout rate. One aspect is the economic circumstances, which lead very often to pupils leaving school. You have about a third of pupils who enrolled in 2003 writing or sitting for Matric in 2014. And often we speak about the role of education in the economy, but the economy does have an impact on keeping people in school, don't they?
That's right. So we obviously hope that the education system will provide the skills the economy needs. For individuals, we also hope that the education system will provide a pathway out of poverty.
Yep.
And so we look to the school system to be an instrument for transformation in society. But the unfortunate reality, as you say, is that poverty is a big determinant of educational success. For example, if you look at quintile 1 schools versus quintile 5 schools in South Africa, with quintile 1 schools being a poor category of schools, quintile 5 being a richer category of schools. And if you define a well-performing school as having achieved an 80% pass rate in the Matric exam, you find that 31% of quintile 1 schools were well-performing schools in this Matric exam versus 76% of schools in quintile 5. So your circumstances in terms of socioeconomic status have a strong influence on your educational outcomes, and that leads to a bit of a vicious cycle where the poor achieve poor educational outcomes and therefore have limited access to the labour market in the next generation. And that's something we've got to try and reverse over time, but it takes time.
Yeah, it's not just about academics, but the socio-economic circumstances. Exactly. Martin, you mentioned a recent report by the OECD. I mean, that report says that South Africa indeed suffers from what they call a mismatch of skills. You have pupils leaving school, but entering the work and economic environment not being as relevant as they should. Where does the remedy begin to fix this? I mean, is it high school or is it earlier?
Well, to link up to what Stephen was talking about, the problem of dropping out, we would like to see more students achieving Matric and achieving a good Matric. But we've got to take a long-term view on this. I mean, if you look at developing countries, none of them get all their youths to complete 12 years of schooling. It's a long-term project. And whilst you're on your way there, you need to ensure that there are good options for those who do not get that National Senior Certificate. And currently, we are very poorly prepared to cater for those learners, and those are poorer learners. I mean, around half of our youths end up with no certificate, really, from the education system, despite years of schooling. So there's both a certification challenge, ensuring that youths enter the labour market with some kind of evidence of what they've got, even if they left school in grade 10 or 11. And then, of course, there's the quality element, that you want to make sure that that achievement below grade 12 is of a required standard. I think we're making some steps in the right direction. I mean, for example, the annual national assessments has managed to shift the emphasis towards quality in the lower grades. I think there's still we're many steps away from a really good, robust quality monitoring system, but it's a good start.
Will the CATS curriculum help? Because there's mixed opinion on that, but I think largely people believe the quality will be on the upside from this curriculum.
CAPS has generally been well received, but also important is stability. Between 1998 and 2014, in every year except for 2 years, the schooling system was implementing some new curriculum provisions in some grade. So there's been an incredible amount of curriculum instability and people paying attention to induction into a new curriculum as opposed to just getting learning right using whatever curriculum you have. So 2015 is the first year that we really have unprecedented stability in terms of the curriculum. And I think that's an opportunity we should make use of.
Stephen, let me end with you. I want to talk about what appears to be needed, a synergy between the education department and perhaps even the Department of Labour, where we talk about what's needed and how we groom what's needed into the working world. Can, if not with those departments, a synergy more with government work to help heal the problem?
Perhaps there does need to be some sort of synergy here, and I think you could bring in the Department of Higher Education and Training as well, because they focus on the courses offered in universities and in FET colleges. As Martin was saying, it's important also to focus on those who don't get Matric. Matric, and especially those who get bachelor's passes, prepares one for university degrees, and we need to make sure there's a good match between what universities offer and the needs of the labour markets. But we also need to ensure that for those who don't get Matric, or those who get a lower level Matric without the university entrance, that there are other forms of post-school training that they can then participate in that are relevant to the needs of the economy. And that's where, as you say, there is synergy needed between branches of government as well as business as well.
Well, thanks very much indeed.
Just sorting out, for instance, the certification in grade 9 would make the transition to FET colleges easier. Currently, it's difficult for FET colleges to take in people who don't have a Matric because they don't know what those learners actually have learnt.
We're going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed. Martin Gustafsson, a researcher at the Department of Economics in Stellenbosch, and Dr. Stephen Taylor, advisor to the Department of Basic Education. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us.